I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from yourblackworld.com and the Black Business School. And I want to say welcome to Dr. Boyce TV, the home for intelligent Black people. So this is where we have intelligent conversations with people in the community that are doing interesting things. And so today I have the honor and the pleasure to speak with Miss Zephia Bryant. She is the CEO and founder of Bryant Educational Leadership Group. And we're going to talk about a lot of things today. But before I jump into that, I would like to ask Miss Bryant, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Boyce. How are you?
I'm
Good to
doing
be
good.
with you.
Oh, it's great to be with you as well. And you and I were having a robust conversation about leadership.
Right.
And when you say leadership, so many thoughts went through my head. I had to kind of sort them out in my brain.
Right.
I think about leadership in our community. All the way from politicians that sometimes may confuse us to leadership in our households. Business leadership. I remember, I got a leadership coach. Her name's Nicole Price,
Okay.
and I remember bringing her into my organization because I was like, I'm afraid I'm not a good leader yet. I need to learn to be a better leader. So
Good.
over time, I gained a lot of appreciation for the skills of a leader, because I think that it is something that it should be learned and taught, especially in our community. Can you kind of speak to Bryant Educational Leadership Group and what you do, for the world?
Sure. Well, let me just start with the mission statement because I think it's important in terms of that's what grounds us. So our mission is to enable, equip, empower leaders to transform themselves, their campuses, their communities, their organizations, and the world. And so at the end of the day, the vision is to develop this next generation of global leaders. Now, of course, we've had a number of leaders within our communities that have stood out and voices heard and unheard, who've been leaders who've really made a difference. And so at the end of the day, we want to be able to empower our young people, the next generation, to give them those, yes, the soft skills, to give them some transformative skills and strategies for them to be able to lead in whatever sphere that they're in. And so it's just really meeting them where they are. Our programs really are designed based upon the communities that we serve. So we have programs designed specifically for African American student leaders. So, if they were to come to our experience, when they come in the door, Dr. Boyce, they're going to hear the African drums going. They're going to be able to connect. We're going to start with the libation. We're going to talk about the importance of, our ancestors and kind of the spirit that drives our community, and give them some historical background, some information about the communities that we're part of. Because a lot of times what we're learning is there's no knowledge base there. There's no information in terms of maybe some shared experiences, some background experiences for our communities. And at the same time, now let's speak to the heart of who you are. Let's think about transformation, what that looks like. Let's think about some of the challenges that's happening in our communities right now. So how are we a part of the solution? So leadership has multiple different tiers. Yes, it's about enabling them, empowering them to have some fundamental skill sets. It could be communication strategies, conflict management, group dynamics, things that might take them further in the classroom, in their communities. But at the same time, now let's start with negotiation skills. Let's start looking at skills of, how do you become an entrepreneur now? How do you take that idea, develop a concept, and move it forward? So it could be like A to Z, but we're really trying to, almost to a certain degree, one size fits all as it relates to leadership.
Interesting. Well, when I think about leadership, one type of leadership I think about is, in politics.
Okay.
There have been studies that actually show that even though we obtained more Black political leaders over time, like
Right.
hundreds of them, the condition of the Black community did not evolve as much as it should have, educationally, economically, and otherwise. Do you think that, but if you say, like, have we generated these Black leaders? A lot of people say, yeah, look, we got this president, we got mayors and governors and everything else. And it's not even about, sort of talking about like whether or not we agree with them politically one way or the other. But I'm wondering, as a person who teaches leadership and talks about leadership, how should I frame that? How should I see that? If you're talking about generating leadership in the Black community, and we have these people that have become leaders,
right,
the community is not necessarily benefiting from that leadership, what is that? What do I like? Do I put that in a different category, or what is there? What thoughts go through your head when you see that kind of thing happen?
Right. Well, I think I'll say this. I think when I think about, I think about creating training grounds. Let me say that. And I think about when I grew up. I had a village, and not many of us had villages that raised us, that helped develop us, that helped us to think about the community context. So when I left Birmingham, Alabama, there was an expectation that I went back to make a difference in my communities. I'm not saying that that's different for our current politicians or other people that we might see in these so-called leadership roles across the country right now. But I had those teachers, the villages that helped to raise me up and to share a certain level of expectations. And quite honestly, I think because of how I was raised, I was open to be able to sit at the foot of the elders and to listen and hear and to also exchange. Now, I was challenged at the time, but my voice was valued and it was nurtured. And so part of that for me, when I think about there are different categories of leaders. Yeah, we got a lot of Black leaders across the country, but at the same time, we are trying to raise up leaders who really is going to make an impact in their communities in this world beyond themselves. Yeah, you can have aspirations to be a politician. You can have aspirations to be mayor of government. And yes, by chance, that could result in some transformative change. But at the same time, I think there's just some basic fundamentals that we've lost over the years that I've just not seen. And I've worked in higher ed almost 20 years, and I've been working with students now outside of higher ed for another 9 years. And so I'm still looking to identify those training grounds, where we can be at the table with each other and to really support. Times have changed so much, whether we think about social media and things that are happening, we're engaging people more in social media than we are in person in training grounds.
Yeah, well, and by the way, I'm speaking to Mrs. Zephia Bryant. She is the CEO and founder of Bryant Educational Leadership Group. And her website, by the way, is belgllc.com. BELG stands for Bryant Educational Leadership Group, belgllc.com. Please hit the thumbs up button if you haven't done that yet. And also, if you're on Facebook, if you could share this to your Facebook page, that helps us a lot. I asked you that question, Ms. Bryant, not because I was trying to ask an annoying question, but I was sort of thinking about leadership and my own experience as a leader, and really, in my own journey, I had to learn the difference between being a true leader, meaning that not only am I leading people, but I'm actually pursuing the purpose that I agreed, to pursue. When I started this journey, right, we all start saying, I want to do something for my people. That's where I want to be. And I learned that remaining connected to that purpose was an important part of leadership, right? Because you can, I think there's a difference between a true leader versus somebody who was appointed to do a job.
Right. Absolutely.
For example, my dad used to make jokes about how in Vietnam, when he was out in the jungle, that if you came out there and said, oh, I'm your leader, I'm the sergeant because they appointed me, then you were going to get shot. Like somebody's going to shoot you on the battlefield, right? Whereas if you were a true leader, there was a level of respect and connection there that was formed that gave you legitimacy and credibility within the group that strengthened you as a leader, gave you more influence and the ability to, get things done. And so I think about this. I asked that in the context of Black politicians because it almost seems that sometimes our best leaders, our best potential leaders get hijacked away from their purpose. Where they say, for example, look, I really want to be the mayor. I only see myself a leader if I get elected to something, right? Without even considering that maybe you could actually be a more effective leader if you're not elected, right? Maybe instead of getting political power, maybe you go get economic power, and then you can be the rich person who's fighting to advocate for things as opposed to an elected politician who has to serve the corporations. So it almost seems to me, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Isn't even a question. This is
I got you.
So I'm laying this thought out there for you to feast on that idea. But because I'm sure you have something great to say on this. But it almost seems to me that for Black leadership, there is almost a double, triple imperative to be thoughtful about every step of the way, about what it really means to be a leader. For me, I had a PhD. I was teaching college students. I was
Sure.
technically a leader, but I said I do not feel like a leader because the people that I care about are not benefiting from my leadership.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting. Let me start. The first thing that triggered for me when you started this conversation, I remember one of my mentors of mine. She led a national organization to develop Black student leaders for almost 30 years. At the end of the 30 years, boy, she decided that she would bring her conference, her organization to a close. Now, this thing had impacted hundreds, thousands of leaders across the country, touch points, you name it, higher ed, corporate government. When she left, she literally said that the next leader would rise up. She didn't want to name a predecessor. Of course, a lot of times, we're thinking that we need to be very thoughtful and we need to be very mindful in terms of, engaging that next level, in terms of cultivating them, bringing them on board. But I thought that that was something powerful that she said. I had to really sit with that because I'm like, wow, it's much like you talked about, we can self-impose ourselves as leaders, but when you can raise up among the people and the people will call you leader, it really does make a difference in terms of how it is that you're perceived, but how it is that people will work with you and operate with you in terms of reaching that mission and that purpose and that calling or whatever the case may be. And I think for me, these conversations are so important because we do sometimes lose sight of the mission and calling. I do this workshop with young people and it's moving from your now to your next level. But where I start them from is like, what's your mission for your life? Let's ground you in something, just like any other organization, we always reflect upon the mission. So what's your personal mission? What's your life's calling? What's your purpose? What's that one thing that you're really good at, that you're gifted in, that can really help to transform the communities. And so I think a lot of times we just need to continue to have some of those conversations because I think we lose sight. Let me say that we lose sight of this idea. And again, you're pulled in multiple directions. There are going to be a lot of competing agendas. Let me say that. And sometimes we might lose our focus and our grounding. But for me, letting us always get back to purpose and mission is so important. And I think we don't even talk to, and I shouldn't say we don't, but I've not heard a lot of conversations of young people saying, this is what I was called to do. This is my purpose. This is how I'm going to impact the communities. I see students all the time who really have that deepened sense of purpose and calling, who really are coming back and giving back to the communities. And it doesn't matter about the title, the position. It's like, how do I use my influence in the space that I'm in to really make a difference with the issues that really matter at this particular time?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I'll tell you, Ms. Bryant, when I think about that purpose, like knowing what your why is, and holding on to that, I find that to be really important because leadership comes with a lot of distractions and maybe temptations. Yeah. Right. You've seen a lot of male leaders, especially get in trouble, usually some maybe involving, women or money or something, you know what I mean? Something like that. And one of the things that I've always thought about is, that leadership is one of those things where, I think to be an effective leader, you got to really search your soul and figure out, where your blind spots are, figure out who you are, what you're really trying to do. Because what happens also is leadership takes a life of its own, that the more of a leader you become, the more temptations and distractions are going to sort of make themselves present. Right? So someone comes along and they say, oh, I see that you're a leader now, you're a big shot, so I want to give you money to do blah, 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 right? And if you can't play chess and say, well, who am I taking money from? What is it that they want for the money? I've seen people get in trouble for that, because I think that as a community, because money's so scarce, a lot of our politicians get lost because they just take the money from whoever offers it. And we all understand, like, if I have a teenage daughter, first thing I tell my daughter is, no, don't be taking money from any guy who's offering you money, because he might want some for that money and you may not.
What's the agenda?
You may not be down for that, right? Always know the agenda, right? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that in terms of the strategy of leadership, and when you're teaching young people how to become a leader, helping them to know how to be responsible with that power,
Right.
Because that's the other thing too, right? A leader could easily turn into maybe a bully. Well, you look in the White House, right? I know I'm not. This is not pro or anti-Trump, but
Sure.
seriously, right? This is a guy, Donald Trump, who's very sure of himself,
Right.
and he's got a lot of power. And some would say maybe he's drunk with it. Who knows, right?
Right.
So what conversations happen there in terms of saying, when you're talking about when you get that leadership, you get that power. Here's how you remain connected to your purpose. Here's how you make sure you're using your power for the right reasons or in the right way, etc.
You know what? One thing that you talked about earlier, Dr. Boyce, you talked about you had a leadership coach. Even now you have a coach. And I think part of that is also staying connected to someone who can support you, some type of mentor that can guide. Yeah, we're going to talk about, how to negotiate different agendas that come forward, how to make certain that you are really guarding, protecting your space in terms of who comes in and out and who helps to define for you what the agenda might be. And so I think part of the conversation is kind of those fundamental values. If you have a subset of values that you want to stay toward, part of that is alignment. Now, when someone encounters you for partnership, if there are some synergistic efforts that are out there, let's kind of talk about these and how to see through to know exactly what the agendas are, but what the values and the subsets are. So part of that is helping people in terms of find the right coach. Much like yourself, there are people that I have to talk to kind of vet. Okay, let me kind of talk to you about this. Let me get your idea, your perspective, your background. That's going to help ground me and ask the right questions. So I think, it's so important in terms of when we're talking to young people, who you surround yourself with. And so you have a choice in terms of who's in your sphere and who's in your space to a certain degree. Now, mind you, have the outliers that come in and out, but at the same time, be very careful in terms of deciding what the value systems are. I mean, for me, that's hand in hand. We talked about values. We talked about the mission, the purpose earlier. It's almost defining your organization. You're a brand to a certain degree. So what's your values? What's your core values? And then again, always getting you to go back to that. If that's not in alignment, then no, I can't interact and engage with you.
Yeah, I like that. Having both your purpose and your principles.
Yes.
What are your? I agree with you. I think that if you don't have if you don't have those core values laid out, decision making can be tough to do because you end up on these weird slippery slopes where you end up contradicting yourself. And
right.
I think, measuring every action, every step you take against your core values, that saved me from making bad decisions that look good at first, but then I was like, wait a minute, this is our mission. This is who we are. This does not align with who we are. So I'm not messing with that. Right. So I agree with you. Another thing that's interesting, Ms. Bryant, that I processed as you were talking about what you do, which I think is great, is when I also think about leaders, say in the community, when you talk about pastors, we talked about politicians earlier, pastors, etc. And I've seen cases where, where people were not ready to lead, maybe because they hadn't had the right experience. And let me explain this. I'm actually going to use politicians, pastors, and actually Bill Cosby.
Okay.
Oddly enough. I've seen pastors, get power in the church. And let's say it's like some, hotshot 29-year-old preacher, who's single and, and suddenly he's got access to money and a lot of status, influence, and all the other temptations, and get himself into trouble. Why? Well, because he started preaching when he was 4, and he's been the superstar pastor the whole time, and he's never really lived life. He's sort of always got his money and his power and satisfied his ego as a man from being a preacher, which is very different from, say, a guy like my dad was a pastor. He became a pastor when he was in his 50s. Okay. Now, by that time, he'd already made some money. He'd already had power. He'd already, done whatever stupid things young men do. Right. So he didn't become a pastor because he was looking for money and power. He became a pastor because it was connected to his purpose of being closer to God and leading in that way. And so the reason I threw Bill Cosby's name in there is because I even read an article recently that Bill Cosby was actually in prison, that he's actually leading these men now and helping them to man up. And he's part of a group called Man Up, and they speak every week about fatherhood and manhood and things
Okay.
that I really believe in. And again, you know, putting aside the other conversation, I said, this is so great for him that, you know, he's gone through this, you know, that he's made the best of this really humbling experience to be knocked off this perch. And now he's talking to these people he never would have talked to before.
Right.
He's probably talking to them, I believe, in a way that he never would have talked to them if he were, you know, still the old Bill Cosby. Not to say I'm glad, you know, that this was good or bad that it happened. People can feel what they want, but I just thought it was interesting, right? So it's almost like he's a better leader for these men because he's had an experience. That's my point, right? That sometimes it seems that leadership is most effective when you got a testimony. So, you know what I mean? Like what do you think about that?
You know, for me, that's critical because you think about it. You have all of these folks who can really kind of move so quickly to that next level. And there's not been the trials, the tribulations, you know, we can talk about the tests that ultimately lead to the testimony and that. And so what we end up doing is we get to this space of power, privilege, and a number of other things, and we have no fundamental skill sets. So, you know, even if we think about pastors, you accelerated because of X, Y, and Z. Where's your administrative skill sets? You know, where is the fundamentals that it takes to actually run that church? Because in essence, it's still a business that still has to function, you know, and so sometimes the fame, you know, but you still don't necessarily have the fundamentals. And so I think that's when we talk about leadership, at the end of the day, we ultimately have to talk about followership. You know, it's not just about, you know, everybody's, I'm sorry, but everybody's not suited to lead. You know, everybody, your skills might not make you the ideal person that knows how to corral people, know how to motivate, inspire, encourage people to move to their next level, or know how to move someone in terms of their strategic plan from A to Z. But you might have another gifting that, okay, look, I can really take this idea and cultivate it and, you know, generate it, but I'm not the one that's going to help move it forward. So I think part of that is just being honest with who you are and where you are. And the danger here is once we get to a certain place, it's very difficult for someone to then step back and say, well, look, I've not had all the experiences that I need right now. And so I kind of go back to and still who you surround yourself with. Who's going to be honest with you? Because we get to a certain point, and if somebody's kind of risen to the top of the trajectory, who's challenging that person to be able to say, well, look, you might need to kind of step back just for a little bit. You might want to hone certain skills and just kind of have somebody that's going to be honest in your corner and say, look, this is an area you can work on. You know, these are some skill sets you can kind of develop, because at the end of the day, experiences really do matter. They make us who we are. When we've gone through the storm, at the end of the day, you know how to stand at the end of that storm. You know, after the end of the test, you've gone through the fire. It's something about being exposed to the fire that will allow you to be able to stand and give you some skills necessary, you know, to be able to navigate at the next level. Because then the first time you go through the storm and you've gotten there without any tests, what happens? You don't know how to deal with it.
Oh yeah. Well, and really, even in that case, you could still lead. I think you'd have to be honest with yourself about your blind spot.
Yes.
And make sure you've got somebody in your corner who has been through the storms, right? Yeah. So I think that you're right. And what I also fundamentally believe is that leadership really is about service. And you know, and if you, I'm almost to the point. Maybe it sounds cynical, but I'm almost to the point where. If you really understand what leadership really means, you'll almost be reluctant to want to lead, you know, because you know about the downsides they come with the power and the attention and things like that, you know, where you're young and you want the power, you want the attention, right? But then you get older, you're like, yeah, all that attention, that's
right. A lot that comes along with that, you know.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, I'm gonna tell you, Ms. Bryant, I've really enjoyed this conversation with you. This has been extraordinary. And everybody, I want you all to know who I've been speaking with. I'm speaking with Miss Zephia Bryant, Zephia, Zephia Bryant. Somebody type that in, please. Her website is BELGLLC.com. BELG stands for Bryant Educational Leadership Group. That's the organization she founded, BELGLLC.com. And she helps leaders to develop their vision, purpose, and calling. She works a lot with young people, millennials, but it sounds to me like she's smart enough that she can work with everybody from all ages. And I've met her at the FraserNet conference, run by George Fraser, another great leader. And so game recognizes game. George Fraser identified Zephia as an extraordinary entrepreneur, and I hope you guys will go take a look at our website as well. And also reminded everybody, please hit the thumbs up button. If you're on Facebook, please share this video. And I'll be in Los Angeles on the 11th in a few days. So if you'd like to join us there, go to drboycelosangeles.com. That's drboycelosangeles.com. So thank you very much, Ms. Bryant. It was so awesome.
It's my pleasure.
Are you in Alabama right now? Is that where you live? Or
I'm in Maryland. We're based in Maryland now. So phenomenal team of people. We work around the country, but based in Maryland.
Okay, well, maybe one day we'll all get together and have lunch or something. I'd love that.
That would be great.
Person. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Right,
have a great one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.